We have Psalm 105, which is basically 2 pages long. It's tell of all his wondrous works.
God's mighty deeds in bringing Israel to the promised land. Remembering his miracles encourages us to keep living close to him, and the author is David.
I have a little sidebar here. It says a history of faithfulness. I think this is going to be encouraging today. The audience for this psalm is clear. Offspring of Abraham, his servant, children of Jacob. The people of God were to hear and heed these words. The people of Israel seem to have suffered from spiritual amnesia. So, beginning with Abraham, the psalmist recounted the faithfulness of God over the span of 40 verses. The God of Israel allowed no one to oppress them. The word of the Lord was fulfilled in the rise of Joseph. The Lord made his people fruitful, more numerous than their foes. And when they were enslaved, God sent Moses. While the psalm lists various names, God proves to be the main character. It was God who powerfully delivered them from Pharaoh. And though this psalm includes only highlights from Israel's history, the point is clear. Nothing God purposed has failed. The psalmist began with Abraham, yet Jesus would assert plainly in the Gospel of John, before Abraham was, I am. The epicenter of God's faithfulness not only preceded the father of Israel, but also all God's promises eventually find their yes in him. 2 Corinthians 1:20. God remembers his covenant. God's people remember his wonders. Kim, are you up to reading today? Or if you want to just, if you get tired reading, if you just want to name one of us, we can take over.
All right.
I think the theme for today, after everything what you said, Chrissy, was nothing God purposed has failed. Amen.
Amen. Kathy, are you up to reading Worsby today? Okay.
All right. 105. Thank the Lord for all the glorious things he does. Proclaim them to the nations. Sing his praises and tell everyone about his miracles. Glory in the Lord. O worshipers of God, rejoice. Search for him and for his strength, and keep on searching. Think of the mighty deeds he did for us, his chosen ones, descendants of God's servant Abraham and of Jacob. Remember how he destroyed our enemies. He is the Lord our God. His goodness is seen everywhere throughout the land. Though 1,000 generations pass, he never forgets his promise, his covenant with Abraham and Isaac, and confirmed with Jacob. This is his never-ending treaty with the people of Israel. I will give you the land of Canaan as your inheritance. He said this when they were but few in number, very few, and were only visitors in Canaan. Later, they were dispersed among the nations and were driven from one kingdom to another, but brought it all. He would not let one thing be done to them apart from his decision.
Mhm.
He destroyed many a king who tried. Touch not these chosen ones of mine, he warned, and do not hurt my prophets. 16. He called for a famine on the land of Canaan, cutting off its food supply. Then he sent Joseph as a slave to Egypt to save his people from starvation. There in prison, they hurt his feet with fetters and placed his neck in an iron collar until God's time finally came. How God tested his patience. Then the king sent for him and set him free. He was put in charge of all the king's possessions, and at his pleasure, he could imprison the king's aides and teach the king's advisors. 23. Then Jacob, Israel, arrived in Egypt and lived there with his sons. In the years that followed, the people of Israel multiplied explosively until they were a greater nation than their rulers. And at that point, God turned the Egyptians against the Israelis. They hated and enslaved them.
What verse are you
But
on?
God, that was 23 through 25.
Thank you.
26. But God sent Moses as his representative and Aaron with him to call down miracles of terror upon the land of Egypt. They followed his instructions, and he sent thick darkness through the land and turned the nation's water into blood, poisoning the fish. Then frogs invaded in enormous numbers. They were found even in the king's private rooms. When Moses spoke, the flies and other insects swarmed in vast clouds from one end of Egypt to the other. Instead of rain, he sent down murderous hail, and lightning flashes overwhelmed the nation. Their grapevines and fig trees were ruined, and the trees lay broken on the ground. He spoke, and hordes of locusts came and ate up everything green, destroying all the crops. 36. Then he killed the oldest child in each Egyptian home, their pride and joy, and brought his people safely out from Egypt, loaded with silver and gold. There were no sick and feeble folk among them. Egypt was glad when they were gone, for the dread of them was great. 39. He spread out a cloud above them to shield them from the burning sun, and gave them a pillar of flame at night to give them light. They asked for meat, and he sent them quail and gave them manna, bread from heaven. He opened up a rock, and water gushed out to form a river through the dry and barren land, for he remembered his sacred promises to Abraham, his servant. 43. So he brought his chosen ones singing into the promised land. He gave them the lands of the Gentiles, complete with their growing crops. They ate what others planted. This was done to make them faithful and obedient to his laws. Hallelujah. The end.
What did your 13? Could you repeat your verse 13?
Yes. Later, they were dispersed among the nations and were driven from one kingdom to another.
14.
But through it all, he would not let one thing be done to them apart from his decision. He destroyed many a king who tried.
Yeah, I like the way yours read because mine says for 14, 15, he allowed no one to oppress them. He rebukes kings on their accounts, saying, touch not my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm. How did yours read?
But through it all, he would not let one thing be done to them apart from his decision. He destroyed many a king who tried. Touch not these chosen ones of mine, he warned, and do not hurt my prophets.
So not one thing was done to them apart from
his decision.
Yeah.
Just like in Job.
Yep. Anybody else have anything they noticed or want to talk about?
Mine mentions the land of Ham.
Egypt.
Is that what that's referring to?
Where's it at?
Verse 23, Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob dwelt in the land of Ham.
Yeah, it wasn't Ham. We decided that a while back. That's where Ham's people settled in Egypt. Isn't Ham the bad one? Wasn't he the son of Noah that went into the tent?
I have to look back.
I think it is talking about the Egyptians. There for a note in mind for verses 23 to 25, it says, did God cause the Egyptians to hate the Israelites? God is not the author of evil, but the Bible writers don't always distinguish between God's ultimate action and the intermediate steps. Thus, by God blessing the Israelites, the Egyptians came to hate them. References to Exodus 1, 8 to 22. Because God caused the Israelites' blessing, he also said to have caused the Egyptians to hate them. God used their animosity as a means to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. So I think it is talking about the Egyptians as far as Ham.
Well, because Jacob was Joseph's dad, right? So at the end, he did go to Egypt at the end. Any other thoughts? I circled a lot of like action words like he turned, he made, he sent, he spoke, he gave, he struck down, he brought, he spread, he opened, he remembered, he gave.
My Bible says Ham is the ancestor of the Canaanites.
Yeah, because remember he slept with his mother or something happened there that seems to indicate that. Then there was this grandchild that was born. I think his name was Canaan. Have to look it up. But remember, Noah was mad at the grandson. And
Yeah.
they became a separate people, which I believe, if I'm correct, was Egypt.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate you.
It was Ham. A curse upon the Canaanites, he swore.
Was the grandson was, I think, Canaan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which leads you to then question, well, why was he mad at the grandson when it was Ham that did the action, unless this grandson was a product of whatever that action was? Which is unclear. It just seems to make sense.
My book says
So
from Ham.
I'm sorry. Genesis chapter 10 gives you the lineage. And it says the sons, where are we at here? Oh, the sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan.
My book on Ham says from Ham we have the Egyptians, Africans, Babylonians, Philistines, and Canaanites.
That's what I say. Like, I think Nimrod was Cush's kid or grandson or something.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Cindy, are you ready?
Yes.
I had to find you. I was like scanning all the faces.
Overview, verse 1 to 45. Just as Psalms 103 and 104 were matched pairs, so are Psalms 105 and 106, as they look at Israel's history from God's perspective and then Israel's vantage, respectively. This psalm possibly originated by command of David to Asaph on the occasion when the Ark of the Covenant was first brought to Jerusalem. And there are references to 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles. 3 parts. The first part, rejoicing in God's works for Israel. That's verses 1 to 3. Second.
Can you repeat that, Cindy, please?
Yes. Verses 1 to 3, rejoicing in God's works for Israel.
Thank you.
Second, remembering God's works for Israel, verses 4 to 6. Three, recounting God's work for Israel, verses 7 to 45. Subtitle A, Abraham to Joseph, verses 7 to 25. Subtitle B, Moses to Joshua, verses 26 to 45. Verses 1 to 5. 10 imperatives call Israel to a time of remembering, celebrating, and spreading the report abroad of the work of God on Israel's behalf as a result of God's covenant with Abraham. Verse 6, seed of Abraham, children of Jacob. Those who were to obey the commands of 105 verses 1 to 5, that is, the nation of Israel, are in view. Verses 7 to 12, this section rehearses the Abrahamic covenant. Verse 8, 1,000 generations, a reference to an exceedingly long time. A generation is normally 40 years, which would encompass the remainder of human history forever. References to Deuteronomy and First Chronicles.
Deuteronomy
7, verse 9.
Okay.
First Chronicles 16, verse 15.
Thank you.
9 and 10. The original covenant that God had made with Abraham. He later renewed it with Isaac and then Jacob. With Abraham, it gives numerous references in Genesis. With Isaac in Genesis 26, 23 to 25, and Jacob, Genesis 35, 9 to 12. Verse 10, an everlasting covenant. From the time of the covenant until the end, 5 Old Testament covenants are spoken of as everlasting. 1, the Noahic covenant, Genesis 9, 16. 2, the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 17, verses 7, 13, and 19.
Could you repeat that?
Back to number 1?
Yes, please.
Okay. The first one is the Noahic covenant, Noahic, Genesis 9, 16.
Okay.
In the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 17, verses 7, 13, and 19.
Okay.
3, the priestly covenant, Leviticus 24, verse 8. 4, the Davidic covenant, 2 Samuel 23, verse 5. And the new covenant, Jeremiah 32, verse 40.
Okay.
Verse 11, saying, this probably has God's promise to Abraham at Genesis chapter 17, verse 8 in view. Verse 12, few in number. God promised Abraham that he would multiply his small number of descendants to be as numerous as the stars in heaven and the sand of the seashore. And that can be found in Genesis 13, Genesis 15, Genesis 17, Genesis 22. 13, one nation to another. Abraham had migrated from Ur of the Chaldeans to Haran and finally to Canaan. Reference Genesis 11, verse 31. Later, he visited Egypt. Reference Genesis 12, verses 10 to 13, verse 1. Verse 14, he rebuked. The Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues when Sarah was taken to his quarters. Reference Genesis 12:17. Abimelech, king of Gerar, was also rebuked by God. Reference Genesis 20, verses 3 to 7. Verse 15, do not touch, no harm. No one passage in the Old Testament records this exact statement. The psalmist most likely is summarizing several occasions, such as Genesis 20, verse 7, and Genesis 26, verse 11. My anointed ones, my prophets. With poetic parallelism, God's prophets are termed those whom he chose to represent him on earth. In Genesis 20, verse 7, Abraham is called a prophet. This title could also apply to Isaac and Jacob. 16 to 25. The history recorded in Genesis chapters 37 through 50 is in view. Verses 16 to 22 refer to Joseph's experience in Egypt. Reference Genesis 37 to 41. While verse 23 looks to Jacob's trek to Egypt that resulted in a 430-year stay. Several references to Genesis and Exodus.
What verse does that go with?
With the 430-year stay,
Yeah.
verse 23.
Okay.
Verses 24 and 25 give an overall summary of Israel's experience in Egypt. Reference Exodus 1, verses 7 to 14. Verse 23, the land of Ham. Another name for the area in Egypt where part of the descendants of Ham, the youngest son of Noah, settled. References Genesis 9:24, Genesis 10:21, and Psalm 78:51. Verses 23 to 25, God sovereignly used Egypt to judge Israel. Reference Genesis 15, verse 13.
That Psalm 78:51 is where we had figured that out. That was talking about Egypt or Ham.
Verses 26 to 36. God's deliverance of Israel from Egypt through the leadership of Moses and Aaron is rehearsed with a special emphasis on the 10 plagues, ending with the Passover. References Exodus chapters 5 through 12. Darkness, the 9th plague. Verse 29, waters into blood, the 1st plague. Verse 30, frogs, the 2nd plague. Verse 31, swarms of flies, lice.
Can we do those again? I'm sorry.
Yes. In verse 28,
Yes.
darkness, that's the 9th plague. Do you want the reference?
Plague 9. I don't necessarily need that. I just was wanting to mark them.
Okay, verse 29, waters into blood, the first plague.
How do you spell plague? I feel like I'm spelling it wrong. P-L-A.
G-U-E.
Oh, okay, it's right.
Verse 30, frogs, the second plague. Verse 31, flies and lice, the fourth and third plagues, respectively. The fifth plague of pestilence and the sixth plague of boils are not mentioned.
Okay, so plagues 5 and 6.
They're not mentioned. Verse 32 and 33, hail, flaming fire, the seventh plague.
Okay, 32
And 33,
and
hail and
33.
flaming fire, the seventh plague.
Okay.
Verses 34 and 35, locusts, the eighth plague.
Okay.
Verse 36, destroyed the firstborn. The 10th and final plague, which was death to the firstborn of man and beast among the Egyptians. Verses 37 to 41. The psalmist summarizes Israel's exodus from Egypt. God provided for their financial and physical needs, protection by day and night, food needs, and water needs. And there are references to Exodus in that. 42 to 45. The psalmist concludes with a summary that alludes to Joshua's leading the nation back into the high priest, first promised to Abraham. Reference Joshua chapters 1 to 12. And then distributed to the 12 tribes of Israel, Joshua chapters 13 to 24. What God promised, he delivered. Verse 42, he remembered, as promised in verse 8. Verse 45, observe, keep. This theme of obedience begins chapter 1, verses 6 to 9, and ends chapter 24, 14, 15, 16, 18, 21, 24 in the book of Joshua.
Could
And
you
that's it.
give me those Joshua references again?
Yes. 1, 6 to 9. That's where it begins.
Okay.
And then ends chapter 24, verse 14, 15, 16, 18, 21, and 24 in Joshua.
Thank you.
And that's it.
And that is all we have time for today. So we'll have to pick up with Worsby and Tony Evans tomorrow. Any quick thoughts anybody has they would want to share? Or you could write them down and we could talk about them tomorrow. This was really a full of good stuff.
A lot of history.
Mm-hmm. I like they reviewed the covenants. I did go and read that Jeremiah, and I guess I always thought the New Covenant being the New Testament, but like in Jeremiah, he says, I will put it on their hearts, which is what happens in the New Covenant.
It's like the entire Old Testament in one chapter.
Yeah. All right, ladies, we are on to a new card for our trivia. And if you don't have anything else for the good of Psalm 105 for today, we will. Kim, are you going to apply?
Well,
All right. Who said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?
Isaac.
I knew you guys would get that one. Genesis 22, verse 7. It is Isaac who asked, where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Genesis 22, verse 7. You can read up on that. Oh, tomorrow's is going to be a good one. A little more challenging. Great. This concludes your reading of God's Word for today. Until tomorrow.
for sure.
For certain.